Hey everyone! So now that we have our settings down and you guys have a little bit more experience and knowledge about lighting, we're going to talk about how to expose using flash. So let's get to it. Alrighty. So a lot of times people tend to feel a little overwhelmed or confused when it comes to using flash along with your photography. And some people think that the only time to use flash is going to be when it's completely dark, but that's totally not the case. Really, just think of your flash as being another light source. And when you think of it that way, there are so many possibilities when you start learning how to use your flash. Now, before we get into that, let's go over some of the basics. So let's talk about the characteristics of flash. So the quality of the light. The quality of the light is direct. Flash is a very direct light, but you can use all kinds of different diffusers or modifiers. You might have seen things like, well, let me show you one. So this is a modifier. Let me go full screen. So with this, you just stick your flash in here, wrap it around, and now you have a diffusion material to shoot your flash through. And so whenever you see a photographer running around with a flash and then something weird like this, or there's all kinds of different ones, what they're doing is they're diffusing their flash so they don't have such a harsh, direct look to them. Okay, now color temperature. So flash is generally 5000K, so it's about the same color as daylight. If you remember our chart, we had, this was way back in the first couple weeks, where we had, candlelight being really orange to dusk being really blue, and right in the middle was daylight, which is more like middle of the day type of daylight, or 5000K. Flashes are the same. So that's really important to know when you're using flash and you have ambient light or other light going on. And there's ways that you can actually modify your flash by using color gels. So for example, I have a whole bunch of different color gels. So let's say that you were in a place where you were shooting and they have really like yellow overhead lights. Well, then you could just add something like this. Let's go large again. Something like this. It's just like a clear piece of yellow plastic, and this goes right over a flash. There's different ways. So mine's a DIY version. These are actually not made for flash, but I know they're the same thing. So I actually just tape mine down, and now I have a yellow light to balance if there was another yellow light happening in the scene. Okay. Now direction. So built-in camera flashes are right on top, right up here. Let's go ahead and pop her open. So we have this little flash right here. It's right on top. And this often creates a very flat look because we're not seeing the textures that are created by being able to see the shadows. So when you have light that's just coming straight on like that, this could be really good for skin, for like wrinkled skin, because then you don't see the texture. You're not creating shadows under the wrinkles or anything. And so that flattens it out. But in some cases, it's not really that great looking, and there's a very specific look you'll start to see. Here is an example of one of my little Eevee toys, and you can see that we're not really seeing much modeling or three-dimensionalness. There is a little bit. We do have some shadow going on over here, and that's mostly because I turned it a bit, but you can see that there's a pretty sharp shadow right back here. And to be honest, it's a little distracting, right? So that's definitely an on-camera flash look. Now this photo, if you look at the shadow right over here and compare it to this one, it's still pretty harsh, but it's a little bit softer. And all I did was I used my on-camera flash. Let me show you. And all I did was put a napkin from the taco place over the flash, and it diffused the light. Okay, so you don't always have to buy something really fancy. You know, whatever your budget will let you afford is fine, and sometimes free is just fine. Any of the other diffuser materials I talked about before, bags, tissue paper, stuff like that, can be used as a diffusion material. So let's talk about external flashes or speed lights. And when I say that, I mean one of these. Okay, so they can be used off camera and on camera. If you use it on camera, there's usually a place right up the top where, let me take off the thing, where you can just slip it right on. And now you have a camera on your flash. Now the great thing about these, let's go ahead. The great thing about these is that you can actually angle them. So if you're just going straight on, you can do that. You can angle it up, you could angle it around, you can actually even turn them to the side. And you know, you guys use reflectors for your project, so this is a great way. You basically think of, instead of having the camera directly hitting your subject, you are reflecting the light off of another surface, whether it's a ceiling, or you can have a reflector material, a wall, all kinds of different things you can reflect light off of. So yeah, this gives you quite a bit more options when you're talking about using a flash. Now with these, there usually is also this thing that sticks out. So if I pull this out, there's this thing that kind of snaps down. And what this is, it kind of looks like it'd be a diffuser, but what it does, it actually sprays the light out to a more wide angle. Whereas the flash might be coming out at an angle like this. With this sprays it out, so you're getting more of a wide type of look. Now this little thing, this little card, is like a bounce card, kind of like what I was talking about with the reflector. It's not super powerful. I mean, it's not going to make a huge difference. What it does is the light that's coming out that would usually be coming out from up here is instead hitting the card and bouncing back in. So it's actually acting like a little mini reflector. Okay. So here is an example. The exact same setup. Now, this is with the flash straight on like this. And you could see that it's a little bit higher because it's higher than just right here where the built-in flash was. And so you get that high front light instead, which is going to be a little bit more attractive, especially when it comes to portraits. Now this photo was same thing, but with a diffuser. There's not that much of a difference, and I just used the napkin again. Not a huge difference because this is more powerful, so the napkin really didn't do as much. If I wanted to do more, I could double up a bunch of napkins or try to find a diffuser material that's a little bit more thicker, and that would help. Or, I mean, what I usually use is one of these. And what's cool about modifiers like this too is that there's usually some different options. So let's take a look real quick. So right now, what I have is white and white. Now with these, you can actually, let's see, take them off. And I could add this on top of here. And now I have a silver reflector, which gives a whole different look. These are kind of sweet too because you can bend them. You can shape the light a little bit more. So if you wanted to kind of create like this little cone type of thing or more of a bounce reflection, you can totally do that. So it can be a lot of fun to play with. Okay. Don't let all my stuff fall down over here. All right. Now, as I said, we can bounce off the ceiling. So this is when you start getting even softer light. Now, something that's important to know when you're bouncing off the ceiling, though, is the amount of space or length that a light travels. The more there is, the weaker and the softer the light is going to be. So when I took these photos compared to these photos, I did have to change my settings. I did need to allow more light in with my exposure settings. I think with this I had a slower shutter speed once I switched to this to create the same exposure, because instead of, you know, if I'm going straight on, maybe the object is 3 feet away from me, but if I'm bouncing up and the ceiling is, let's say, 5 feet away from me, the light is going 5 feet up and then 5 feet back down. So that's 10 feet. Be the same as if you were 10 feet away from the object. So the light's not going to be as strong, but it's going to have a way softer feel. And then this one was bounced, but again with a diffuser. So now you can see that we're really starting to get a nice soft light going on here. So here are all 6 of those examples, so you can really see the differences. So you can tell, let's go like this. You can tell what a difference this is all making. So this is, you know, super harsh shadows. And you can also see like the lights. We have like these little, you know, highlights that are popping up in different places from the plastic. While in these ones, those highlights aren't nearly as pronounced. We still have them, but they're not nearly as pronounced as with this. You can also see that the direction is different. So with this one, it's a little bit more straight on. This one, it's a little bit higher, and then this one's the highest of all because it's bouncing up to the ceiling and then back down. So it's more of like almost an overhead type of light. All right, so not only can you use these flashes on camera, you can use them off camera, which really starts opening up a whole new world of lighting with this. So there's a couple different ways. When I do event photographies, depending on the event photo shoots, it kind of depend on the event. Sometimes I would just leave it on. If I was in a place with a ceiling, I'd probably bounce it up onto the ceiling if it's close enough. You know, if you're in a really big place where the ceiling is like 20 feet above you, it's pretty much pointless to try to bounce, because by the time the light goes up and then comes back down, you're not getting any light anymore. It's spread around the whole room. It's not helping your exposure. So, you know, being able to gauge that stuff becomes important. But you can do things like the cheaper option to be off camera is to wire it. So they have wires like this, where one side, you guys can't see, here we go, where one side hooks in. Okay. One side hooks into your camera, and then the other side goes onto your flash. And so now I can really start having some directional light. Instead of just being straight on, I can decide, okay, I want to have a bit of a side light, or 30 degree or 45 degree light, something that's a little nicer looking for the person, and I can move around however I want. So this can be really great when you're working alone, you don't have stands, or you don't have like a, you're not like doing a portrait shoot where you would have stands set up. So this kind of stuff for event photography can be really fun. I especially like using this setup for bands, because then you can get really creative with the lighting, and then you start throwing in some gels. For example, I don't have just yellow gels in here. Let's see. Put my yellow one back in here. I actually have all kinds of different colors in here. So this is really fun, because then you can start saying, okay, I want to change it up and I want to use a blue light. Maybe I want to use, I don't know, maybe a green light. All right. Now here is one that is actually made for a flash, and oh, I don't have the band with me. It's on my other flash, but really it just flops over the flash. You bend these over, and then there's like a rubber band type of thing that holds it down. There's all kinds of different systems for like this. There's some where you screw things on. Like I said, I actually found this set. This is actually a test set, because gels are used, big pieces of this are used in stage productions. So when you have like a concert or a play or something like that, they have the big spotlights coming down. They're usually using gels to make different colors. So I contacted a company who makes gels for big productions, Well, I found on their website that they had these like test kits, just so, you know, people can see, oh yeah, I want this one or that one, and then they order. Well, it turns out that they actually work perfect for my flash. Yay! So yeah, quick tip on that. Be on the lookout for stuff like that. You can also buy sets like this online if you want them. Okay. Oh yeah, and you can also go wireless. So here is one type of wireless receiver. It's called a Pocket Wizard. And kind of the same thing. So here's where you hook in the flash. Here you can add it to something else that has like a flash type of look, or receiver, I guess it would be called. Here is a tripod holder. So you put it on tripod, light stands, whatever you need. And then, yeah, you have a wireless light, little antenna. And you can use your flashes wirelessly. So yeah, starts creating all kinds of options, because basically now you can use flashes and like how you're doing with your studio project, your studio lighting project, where you can have it as a main light, as a fill light, as a backlight or rim light, background light. All these things become possible. It's just another lighting or way to light, and it's really not that scary at all. All right, so now, like I said, built-in flashes do create a very direct, harsh look. Some people think that this is a raw look, and it definitely comes in and out of style. So let's look at a couple photos from this article or blog post. Let's see. Okay, and it's funny because the last time it came in style, it's starting to come back in style again, but the last time is actually based on the work of some fine art photographers who were exclusively shooting with this very harsh flash look. So, example of a salad. Okay, you can see with this here. Now, you know, they're using, this is more of a direct flash look, because if it was an on-camera flash, then the shadow would actually be back here, right? We wouldn't be seeing it from the side. Right now it's being shot from the side here. That's why we have the shadow in the back. So yeah, it's the direct, harsh look that people are looking at. Again, here's an example of how it's used, and it feels like it's a little bit more of a raw type of look. People at some type of protest or something. And so it's very different than having, you know, the modified soft look, again, direct, raw type of feel to it. So yeah, it's definitely its own style. Maybe this is your style. I don't know. But they're pretty straightforward, okay? They're on top of your camera. You know, you can add your own little like diffusers and stuff, but that's about it. That's why I actually like these, because you can do so much with them. You can really, whatever lighting you want to create, you can do it with flashes. Okay, so let's talk about when to use flash. So obviously light is essential to photography, and so flash is just a light source, and it can be used in so many ways. So let's look at a couple. Not all documentary photographers or photojournalists use flash, but those that do add light to their photos tend to use flash because they're portable. They're easy to carry around. A lot of these people are running around with the cameras full of photo gear, and so what are they going to fit in there? They can't fit in some huge studio light or anything, so they take flashes with them. So here's an example where this was taken in a very small space. They wanted to add some light. Thought I had, yeah, there we go. Tim Hetherington is the photographer for this. And it really, you know, he could have definitely done something to make the background brighter. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I have a feeling he didn't want to do that. He wanted to express the darkness and what feels like a black hole of this person's experience. That's what I get from it, at least. Really powerful image. So for landscape and cityscape photography, flash is great for lighting foreground subjects. These were all both taken by myself, and for these, basically, you know, the background, this is the Jefferson Memorial. It was lit up, it was beautiful, the sky was beautiful. I wasn't worried about lighting that. What I was worried about, a foreground subject. And so this bridge that we were walking by had this 1908 on it. I thought, perfect, but it was completely dark. So what did I do? For this, I held, pointed, shot. Now I have light on my foreground subject. So it could be super helpful in situations like this. Here's one more from Vegas, Fremont Street. So again, the background is lit fine. This is super bright, but I did want to go ahead and capture the graffiti that was on the back of this light pole thing. So exact same method. Just, I think this one was actually on my camera. So I had it on and just turned this top part over and then bam, shot. And done. Good lighting on my background and my foreground subject. Okay. And in fact, this is what I actually did for the very first photo of the lecture. So this was at a band performance, and there was these great lights, you know, here are the lights going on that are hitting the performers. They're lit up fine, but what I wanted to get was the interaction between them and the audience. So exact same method. Let me actually put it on here. Exact same method. I'm shooting, I turn my flash and shoot, and so now I have a great exposure of both the band and the audience members. All right. And as you guys found out recently, outdoor portraiture. This is what really makes portrait artists or portraiture photographers stand out. Don't get me wrong, there's always great times to use natural light only. Sometimes you have just stunning natural light, and that's completely fine. But controlling light is a huge part of being a photographer, and understanding light, and that's what you guys are learning to do right now. So this is a perfect example. These are from our last guest speaker, Isaac, some of his fashion shots. And so with this, you know, he has this lovely image here. He has a backlight or rim light or hair light happening. So this is most definitely probably a flash or a strobe. That's lighting her up here, and then we have another light coming in over here. So, and you can see that it's very directional because look at her skin compared to the skin on her legs. So the flash is hitting up here, bringing your attention right to her face. Beautiful. Same thing here. So this one, we have sunlight, but it's definitely hitting him from the side. Look back here, it's hitting him back here, the side here. It's basically, he's using the sun as a rim light. The background is already lit beautifully just from the ambient natural sunlight. Then the direction of sun is coming in from the side here to create a rim light. And then he's got another light coming in. Actually, it looks like, judging from the lights in his eyes, it's coming in from the side here to create this, you know, beautiful look. Love it, love it, love it. And this is all just using the same principles as the studio lighting project, where you're just thinking of the lighting when it comes to your main light, your fill light, your rim light, and your background light. Okay, event photography. So, you know, these ones, these are some casual event photos. These were photos I took at band performances again. Where, you know, it's not always about shooting the band. Getting the audience is really important to me too. So, you know, this one was inside of a really, really, really dark bar. Okay, there was, you know, I would have to be like at ISO 6400 to get anything decent. But by using a bit of flash, and I believe I bounced on this one. No, there's a bit of catch light here. So I think this one might have been direct. Oh yeah, you could see the shadow here. So this one is direct, but we're still getting a lot better light, a lot better quality of light. Now in this situation, so yes, it's outdoors, the background looks great, but they were completely in shade. So for this one, again, use some flash to go ahead and just lighten them up. Because the important thing to remember when you're using flash is that it doesn't go that far. It's not going to hit something in the very background. It's not affecting these trees or anything. It's only going to be affecting what's in the foreground. More on this in a second. Okay. Oh, actually, that's what I was just getting to. So, some important things to know about flashes that are going to help you understand how to expose with it. So flash only lasts a fraction of a second. So the shutter speed doesn't affect the amount of light you capture. Okay, so if I'm shooting someone, that flash is just going to go on and off. And so if I change the shutter speed from 1/60th of a second to 1/25th of a second, it's not going to change the exposure because the flash is still the same amount of light is coming out. Now, the times when you do need to think about shutter speed is the flash sync speed. So what this means is that most cameras won't let you set your shutter speed faster than the sync speed because it's quite technical. Let me just show you what it does. There's some photos in this article right here. So usually flash sync speeds are around 1/200th of a second, depends on the camera. And so you're going to get, if you're at 1/200th of a second, you're fine, no big deal. Now, if you go faster than 1/200th of a second, though, you're going to see a black band. What this is, it's literally the shutter. It's happening so fast and the burst of light is so fast, but if you try to have your shutter speed go any faster, it's actually capturing the shutter movement within your photo. You can see where it's getting worse and worse. So the important thing to know, though, is that most cameras don't even let you set anything past that. If you have your flash set up on it, your camera knows that there's a flash there, and so it says, nope, can't go faster than 1/200th of a second. And it changes per camera. Some cameras are 250. Some cameras actually have high speed sync where you can go as fast as like 1/4000th of a second. And there's a price tag that comes with that. That's one of the things that makes, one of the variables when it comes to camera prices. Does it have high flash sync speed? If you're ever going to do something with high flash, a really fast shutter speed and such, then that becomes important. So for example, if you've ever seen photos of like droplets frozen in the moment or something, a lot of times you have to have a pretty fast shutter speed. So if you're shooting like something like that in the studio, you want to have a really high flash sync speed. Okay. And there is this link here if you would like to read a little bit more about it, if you think that's something that's going to be important in your photography. And last but not least, like I said earlier, the light doesn't go very far. Now, some flashes are stronger than others. That's another variable when it comes to how expensive a flash is. The more expensive flashes are probably going to have brighter light. The more inexpensive flashes, probably not so much. But so just because flashes are pretty strong, that doesn't mean it's going to be able to properly light something that's far away. It's not enough light, okay? So really, it's enough light for closer objects. And when you buy a flash, all of that information comes with your manual. You can read the specifics on all of these different things. So as with buying a camera, you should read your manual. Also with any other photo equipment, read the manual. It'll answer so many questions. And so what cracks me up is, have you ever been to like a stadium event, concert, or sports game, and you can see everyone's flashes going off? Blink, blink, blink. Okay, those flashes are doing nothing. Everything is too far away. That flash is not going to hit anything. The only thing it's going to illuminate is the back of the person's head sitting in front of them. All right, so if you realize your flash is going off, just turn it off. It's just wasting your battery. Okay. Rant over. All right, so now exposing with flash. So now that we know all of this stuff, let's apply it to a photo shoot where, let's say, the background is brighter than your subject. So the flash isn't going to hit your background. So what you need to do is you need to set your exposure for the background. So you point your camera towards the background and take a meter reading, set your meter, take a test photo. Does the background look great? Okay, move on. If it doesn't, play with your settings a little bit till you have a good exposure for your background. Once you've done that, then it's time to actually set the light, your flash. So wait, let me see, did I miss anything? Oh, this is just what I would do. Set ISO to 100, set aperture according to the amount of depth of field you want, right? Set the shutter speed so you have a good meter reading, keep it under the flash sync speed, then adjust the ISO if necessary. Okay. So that's step one is, set the exposure settings for your background. Step two is add light to your subject with flash. So it really just comes down to setting your background light and then setting your foreground light. So with flashes, there's different flashes are going to have different modes, but the two most common ones that pretty much every flash has is going to be manual and TTL, or through the lens. So when I'm working in like a studio or a portrait type setting, I like to use manual, and basically you just adjust the intensity of the light. You have full power, which is 1, and then it goes down to half power, quarter, eighth, 16th, 1/32, and it depends on your flash. Like my flash that's actually on my camera, like the built-in flash down here, this little one only goes to 1/32 power, whereas my big flash goes to 1/128. So I can really cut down the light quite a bit if I need to, and just have like a little bit of light coming in. And so yeah, so if we're going back to this idea where I've set my background exposure, and then I take a test shot, I go with full power, take my test shot with my subject. If it's way too bright, then I just take it down a half a power, try again, or take it down a couple and try again. Another thing you could do is just step back because as you step back, that light is going to be weakening. Adding modifiers is going to weaken the light also. So then it just becomes finding the intensity of the flash. Okay, now through the lens is kind of like auto for flash. The camera / flash, depending on the setup, decides the power depending on the meter reading, pretty much the meter reading. That gets into a whole nother technical thing we won't get into, but yeah, so it takes in the information and decides. Now, I like to use TTL for things like events where the light is changing rapidly, where, there's more lights on this side of the room than this side of the room or whatever. It makes it, there's usually a bit more editing, got to go in and change some exposure a little bit because it doesn't always get it right on. But when you just got to be shooting on the fly, it can be really helpful. So those are the situations I use TTL in. All right, so let's go ahead and watch a little bit of this video. We'll just watch one of his examples. He goes through this whole process a couple of times, so you guys are more than welcome to come back and watch this entire video on your own. Okay, so let's go ahead and start from here.
I wanted to show you guys this because this is actually with no light firing at all. We're not pretending like with the first example. This is actually just only natural light falling on here. This is exactly how it looks like with no flash. I have my settings dialed at 1/100th of a second, ISO 100, and f1.4. And let's say, for example, I wanted the image to be brighter by 1 stop, and I wanted to just only the ISO. Well, the way I would do that would just be doubling that ISO. I would go from ISO 100 to ISO 200, and that would give me a 1-stop brighter exposure than what you're seeing right now. One bit of feedback whenever I take my photos is that you guys feel like the background is a little too dark. Well, that's exactly what you would do to this photo.
Dude, I was totally thinking his background's too dark. But to each their own. Okay, let's go forward a little bit. Let's see.
I would give you a 1-stop brighter exposure. But I like this image how it is on the screen right here. So once I have the settings dialed in and have the background exactly how I want it to look like, then again, I can start to add flash. On the screen right now is of course just natural light. Then I add the rim light and it gives me this kind of image. And again, if I felt like the rim light was too...
Okay, so if you guys can see, here is the rim light right here, going along her entire back and her hair. This is looking really nice. Again, not again, but I think I would actually want a little bit more rim on the top of her head right here, but this is looking pretty good.
Too bright, then I would go ahead and just adjust it to be lower output. So let's say, for example, the rim light is actually at 1/4 power. If I felt that was too bright, then I would think, okay, how darker do I want it to look like? And if I want it to be just one stop darker, then I would just reduce the output from 1/4 power to 1/8 power. And if I wanted it to be 2 stops darker, then I would go from 1/4 to 1/8, which is 1, and then 1/8 to 1/16, which is another stop of power. And I know it can be a little bit confusing with fractions, but it's honestly as simple as doubling and having the fraction, the number, so you can just think of it like that if you find fractions confusing. Now that I have the rim light dialed in where I want it to be, then I can start to add the main light, and I have the main light on in that photo right here. And I actually do have it dialed in exactly where I wanted it to be.
Okay, so this is gorgeous, right? Like, what a huge difference that made. Now, don't get me wrong, let's see, let's go back. So there was a natural light photo, and maybe with a little bit more exposure, it would have been fine. I mean, it's a pretty decent photo. He has a lovely model. The light is nice and soft, but taking it up here, let's see, where are we? Okay, so now we have, you know, the background is looking good. We have that rim light coming in, and then we have that main light really making a huge difference here.
Power, but again, if I wanted it to be brighter, then I would just raise the power of the strobe, and if I wanted it to be darker, then again I would just lower the output. Here's a quick behind the scenes photo of the setup, and one thing that you guys do ask me a lot is this shot with the lights modeling lamps on or any sort of continuous lighting on? And the answer is no. I actually have a video.
Okay, so let's step back just a sec. All right, so when he's talking about continuous or modeling lights, so in this example, he's actually using strobes. But when it comes to using flashes versus strobes, it's the same basic principles. So he keeps saying flash, but he's really using strobes. But it's the same principles, okay? Again, you set your exposure for the background, and then you set the intensity of the lights. You're not, you know, at this point, once you're playing with these lights, he's not changing the aperture, the ISO, the shutter speed anymore. He's just changing the intensity of how bright these lights are actually going. Now, he did say that, you know, they're talking about modeling lights. What modeling lights mean is it's a weaker version of the light that's just on, and that's just so you can see the direction of where the light is actually hitting. So, you know, if he wants to have it here, he can actually see it. If he needs to move it to the side or something. Once he actually takes the photo, though, it flashes, and then you get the real intense light actually coming in. So that's really important to know, that just looking at it, when you have modeling lights, you're getting an idea of the direction of the light, but you're not getting an idea of the intensity of light until you actually take the photo. Okay. So really, this is just to underscore the fact that you know, people get really confused with flash and with using lights like this, but it really is that simple. Set that background exposure, and then put in your lights in the directions you want, and then figure out the intensity for that. Do you want it really bright? Do you want it a little darker, darker? Where do you want it to go? If you get it down to the smallest setting and it's still too much light, you can just pull the light back and it's going to make a difference. Okay, so I did add an optional quick article here, or blog post, how to understand the difference between TTL and manual, if you guys would like to dig into that a little bit more. But yeah, that's it. Flash isn't really as complicated as people make it seem. I don't think it is. Maybe this was a lot of information. I don't know. You guys can tell me. But once you start using it, it really makes a huge difference. And because you are taking control of the situation, you're no longer just depending on whatever light happens to be there. You can use the knowledge that you have about light to craft more beautiful images or more impactful images. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the lecture.